What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
Smooth and soft. The history of the DualMass Flywheel is quite simple, and it started a long time ago. The first flywheels of this design appeared back in the 1980s. Their very widespread use today can be attributed to two reasons: the progress of motors and the requirements of environmental regulations. Let's start with motors. The first motors were very vibration intensive, and technologies that did not allow to manufacture them with modern precision and carburetor feeding and imperfect mechanical ignition systems made the motor operation not very stable, especially at idle when the crankshaft moved with jerks. In order to somehow reduce these torsional vibrations, heavy cast iron flywheels were used. They partially solved one part of the problem, uniformity of idling. But there was another problem: how to start from a place without jerks as smoothly and comfortably as possible. For this purpose, they decided to improve the clutch. More precisely, its driven disc. Have you seen, probably, on these discs, or at least their photos, springs? This is nothing but the main element of torsional vibration damper. Thanks to this damper, when starting from a place and driving at minimum RPM, it was possible to significantly reduce torsional vibrations of the crankshaft transmitted to the gearbox. However, in some situations, the drive disc torsional vibration damper cannot cope with its task. I think everyone remembers how the car starts shaking when an inexperienced driver tried to start from the third gear or drove too slowly in high gear. The idler disc is not ready for that abuse. And it was happening more and more often, not because of the driver's fault, but because of environmental regulations. Yes, the environment is just as much to blame as whoever is behind the wheel and mixing up the gears. After all, you can't be green and have high engine speeds at the same time. It doesn't mix. Idle speeds were getting lower and lower, and despite the growth of technology, injector, hydraulic motor supports and other things that reduce vibration, torsional vibrations still disturbed comfort. Reduction of weight of motors, associated with the transition from cast iron to aluminum alloys, also made its contribution. The lighter the motor, the more it is subject to vibration. And over time, they found an interesting way out of the situation. Instead of a torsional vibration damper on the driven disc, it was decided to put it directly in the flywheel. Besides, such a DualMass flywheel was lighter than a simple cast iron one, which is also good. A big jump in the spread of DualMass flywheels is associated with the emergence of robotized boxes, especially German DSG. Cars with such boxes are sharpened for economical driving at minimum revs in the maximum possible gears. They should pull from the lowest, where vibration will always be a lot. Therefore, with modern robots, DualMass flywheel is always there. Well, the second factor is diesels. Of course, modern diesels with common rail do not dance under the hood like the good old diesels of the 80-90s, but still they are also quite vibration loaded, and they have good traction at low speeds. It is a godsend to put DualMass flywheels, so they are very common on diesel cars. On the one hand, it gives the car extra comfort; on the other, often falls apart and costs a lot of money. Why? Two masses, two problems. The DualMass flywheel has two main parts. Its outer housing, primary disc, is similar to a normal flywheel. There is the same crown for the starter gear engagement and usually a synchronization disc for the crankshaft position sensor. But inside this housing, there are a lot of parts. These are packages of springs that dampen vibrations, sets of hard and soft springs, a wheel with internal teeth, planetary gears, axial and radial bearings, and all this is covered by a second housing, secondary disc, to which adjoins the driven disc of the clutch. So it turns out that the two housings pivot relative to each other and are held in place by spring packs. Nothing too complicated, but it is quite obvious that this is already a mechanism and not a monolithic cast iron plate, like a simple flywheel. And any mechanism wears out over time, including the DualMass flywheel and the Toyota Land Cruiser 100. We can distinguish two reasons for the failure of the flywheel. The first is natural wear and tear, the second, breakage due to a violation of lubrication. The wear of the DualMass flywheel is inevitable. Springs over time change their characteristics. Both discs begin to move relative to each other too freely without the necessary force. This, unfortunately, is inevitable. The same can be said about the bearings, which are not eternal either. Like it or not, at some point it will be time to repair or replace the flywheel. But its premature wear is usually associated with defective lubrication. The thing is that the grease is placed in a sealed space where springs and bearings work. Of course, it is laid for life, that is conditionally eternal, as, for example, the oil in the automatic transmission. We all realize that nothing is eternal, and this grease gets old. Especially quickly it becomes unusable due to overheating. And very quickly due to frequent overheating. It's easy to overheat it. Do you remember how inexperienced drivers burned the clutch? Incorrect work with the pedal led to the fact that the friction pads were slipping for too long, heated up from friction and burned. Now you can do the same thing with a DualMass flywheel, overheat the lubricant that is embedded in it forever. It is a shame, but it is such a payment for comfort. In general, driving style influences the flywheel life quite strongly. Overheating lubrication can be caused by long slippage in the mud or snow drifts or when towing a heavy trailer. Very negatively, flywheel refers to careless work with the clutch. Abruptly throw it is not worth it, it is a blow to the flywheel. Nor should you drive at too low speeds. In this case, the flywheel has to dampen very strong torsional vibrations, which significantly shortens its life. It is undesirable to drive with a defective motor or motor mounts. The flywheel will compensate for jerks in case of ignition misses. It will soften the engines dancing on a torn hydraulic bearing. But in the end it will fail before its time. And, of course, chip tuning. For some reason, many people worry about the automatic, but do not think about the poor flywheel. And for nothing, if the cast iron flywheel does not care what moment from the crankshaft to transmit to the clutch, the DualMass flywheel has a limit of strength. So you should be careful here too. Repair and replacement. We have learned how to repair DualMass flywheels. Now they are quite successfully disassembled, springs and bearings are replaced, fresh grease is put on, welded, balanced and sent on their way. They can even give quite a decent warranty. The work, of course, is not cheap, but still not as ruinous as buying a new flywheel. Here the prices for original spare parts are quite high. For example, on an ordinary Mondeo it can be bought for $45,000 to $50,000. It is better to change or repair the flywheel together with the replacement of the clutch. Because, firstly, for its replacement you still need to remove the box and clutch, and secondly, because there is a high probability that two sets of clutch flywheel will not survive anyway. But here, of course, everything is individual. Just if there are plans to drive the car for a long time, and when replacing the clutch it turns out that the flywheel will soon go to the dump, it will be more profitable to replace it at once. The question arises, is it possible to put a single mass flywheel instead of a dual mass flywheel? Which is many times cheaper and practically eternal? Usually, yes, you can. But it is necessary to pay attention to the clutch drive disc. If the stock it stood without torsional vibration damper, it must be replaced by another with a damper. Otherwise it will be quite unpleasant to drive. By the way, many people like this replacement for one more reason: they think that the car has become faster to start from a place and accelerate. It is partly so. Damping of the DualMass flywheel is noticeably more pronounced than damping of the damper of the driven disc, which makes it seem that the car has become half a second faster to leave the place. However, the popometer is not the most accurate instrument and its readings are very subjective. Maracas, tambourine and flute. How do you realize when buying a used car that the DualMass flywheel needs repair? Frankly speaking, it is quite difficult. It is usually said that it clanks, which is especially noticeable when starting from a place. However, it usually clanks when it has almost completely fallen apart. At the initial stage, it makes very different sounds, similar to the sound of maracas, sometimes a tambourine. Sometimes it can whistle, but it is very difficult to determine that it is the flywheel. The box and clutch can also sound in a similar way. And if you listen to all this, sitting in the cabin, you can take for the sound of the flywheel even knocking about the body protection of the crankcase sump or insulation screen of the exhaust system. The exact condition of the flywheel can be determined only after removing the gearbox and clutch, at least by assessing the angle of rotation of the secondary disc and its axial play. When buying a car, more or less accurately check the flywheel can be one way, on one of the higher gears, 5th or 6th, sharply press on the gas with initial revolutions within 1000 to 1100. If there are extraneous sounds or jerks, the flywheel, most likely, already requires repair. If everything is in order, it means that it is still able to overcome the vibrations that are bound to occur during such an experiment. In conclusion, while a DualMass flywheel offers significant advantages in terms of performance and comfort, its complexity and higher cost cannot be overlooked. Understanding the reasons behind its necessity and the common causes of breakdown can help vehicle owners make informed decisions about maintenance and repairs. By recognizing the DualMass flywheel's role in enhancing driving experience, we can appreciate the balance it strikes between efficiency and durability. Ultimately, investing in quality components and regular upkeep is essential to ensure that this sophisticated technology continues to deliver its benefits for years to come.